Happy New Year, everybody. Hope everybody had a good break, holiday with family and friends. Back to work. Back to checking up on what all happened while everybody was having a good time. Going to hit a couple of market points here, and today's going to be more new year, new market, new stuff going on, as opposed to focusing on one particular topic. I think it's important to take note of progress and markers. And I think referencing these data points at certain times, either year over year, month over month, or what have you, is a good indicator of what has changed, as opposed to going based off these guttural feelings. That's the one thing I always hate in the middle of an open house. Somebody comes in and just tells you, I feel like the market's going to do this. And when I question these people, well, what makes you think that? I know your gut feeling is one thing, but we've all made mistakes in life. Nobody is free from that. So trusting your gut is not always the most reliable piece of data. And with a plethora of data out there, why not take advantage of it? It's just a matter of how to appropriately draw and configure the picture, as far as I'm concerned. So first bit of news, interest rates. That's a big thing. We've covered interest, appreciation, depreciation. All of this is really significant for calculating your interest rates. Also, one of the biggest factors when purchasing a home, and talked about it in the context of affordability, and how that impacts your ability to purchase a home. So, as of today, as reported through the bank that our real estate company more or less kind of partners with, can't say actually partners with because that's not how that goes, but just somebody who helps keeps us informed on what current interest rates are. 30-year fixed rate, conforming, so that means non-jumbo. 4 1/8 jumbo, 4 1/8 15-year fixed, 3 3/8 jumbo, 3 7/8 10-year fixed, 4 1/8 jumbo, 3 5/8. I don't know who's doing less than a 10-year fixed rate. That's pretty nutty. Conforming loan limits: 1 unit 484, 2 unit 620, 3 749, 4 931. So not bad, but we are seeing more numbers in the fours. And it's unavoidable. As the Fed continues to decide that they want to increase interest rates, this is what's going to happen. And I think the last report that I read was predicting that the Fed's target was to increase interest rates maybe twice more for the year of 2019. I mean, they were super low. These are still good. I mean, you can think back in the 70s, interest rates were like 15%. So from a historical standpoint, they're still great. It just makes it tough. And I'll talk more about how that impacts the overall real estate market and where we're at with that. So today is more local. And there are a couple more macro points I want to pick up, not necessarily related to market, but just more or less why this is significant. Talking about money, talking about managing it all, and understanding the market and whatnot. Back to market evaluation. So I think the real takeaway is I was calculating the numbers in the middle of our meeting here. Market softened. Bottom line is that it's softened significantly. We saw it pretty much starting off in the latter half of 2018. We've kind of seen some slow changes to the market that way. But when you get the hard data numbers, it's hard to fight that. And it's very visible. So, for instance, between Costa Mesa, Newport Coast, and Corona del Mar, and I apologize for my music. Calculator. So what we have here is between Eastside, Costa Mesa, Newport Beach, Newport Coast, and Corona del Mar. Number of currently active properties that aren't in escrow, haven't closed. No, they're just currently available. We have a total of 523 for January of 2019. January 2018, we had a total of 420. So the year-over-year growth difference is about 25%. Right? 523 divided by 420. It's 1.24. So that means that we've had just shy of a 25% increase in overall active inventory. That is huge. That is a ginormous number. So what it tells us is that inventory has increased by 25% overall. That in particular absolutely blows my mind. So for contingent properties, this means properties that are in escrow, properties that have received an offer and are moving forward in the process of closing that transaction. So for January of 2019, we've got 82. January 2018, 129. So if I'm doing that math, that's a decrease of almost 37%. So we've had an increase in inventory of 25% and a decrease in transactions by 37%. It would be one thing if we saw an increase in inventory and an increase in transactions. But the fact that we're seeing what's more or less kind of the opposite is the part that comes across scary. Now, I would be more frightened if there appeared to be some sort of huge significant reason for this that would cause a complete pivot and nosedive like the recession. But when you look at the overall macro data in terms of employment rates are going down slightly. But last report I read seemed to indicate that it wasn't because people are being laid off. It was more of people either have two jobs or people who may have been out of work for more than 6 months. So those people typically get written off as eliminated from the data set, either because people assume that they had a change in lifestyle, something different happened. Wage growth is increasing overall, but with increasing interest rates, that also decreases the affordability. So you have to have more income to qualify for that same $1 million property because your payment's going to be higher with a higher interest rate. So I think my more or less thesis of all of this is just the room, and I think I mentioned this last time, the room for growth has shrunk. And I'll point out an article later on that is a good example of that. But there just isn't that increasing growth. Like there's a certain market cap of you've tapped everybody. So in order for this to continue to grow, and people would need to want to move to a bigger house, increase their debt in some capacity. And in order to do that, somebody would have to reallocate their funds. So if they're spending, like I was talking to a client of mine the other day, and we were talking about the disposable income that people have or seem to have and what it's being allocated towards. He was telling me his wife doesn't even seem to have shampoo anymore. She's going to the dry bar all the time, getting her hair done. So there's that. Restaurants are doing significantly better than they were pre-recession. So a lot of people are going out to eat, spending money on that, and cooking a lot less. I might argue that there might be an association with going out to eat more and the birth rate. Birth rates are declining. People are young couples, not staying home with kids. They're going out to eat. And it's easier to do that because you're not paying the babysitter and going out to eat. You know, a lot of the funds can be allocated to you and not the kid and the babysitter and the stuff for the baby and all this other stuff. So you see more of it spent on restaurants, dry bar, workout classes. I think something that people are always floored by when they first move to Southern California is the popularity of all these workout classes. It's, do you do Orange Theory? Do you do the 12? Do you do Soul Cycle? What is it that you do? Because everybody's practicing their own religion of whatever their workout class is. And it's shocking how significant a role it can play. And it's not CrossFit necessarily. ClassPass, I know, is another one that I've seen people use where I know someone who is doing it 3 times a day. Just nutty stuff. But that's what you have to do in order to get your money's worth. So, and a lot of these people would either have to drop a lot of these activities that have become part of their lifestyle, get a less expensive car, and decide that they want to take on more household debt. But again, I think it comes back to a lot of millennials not wanting to be caught in the position that they saw their parents caught in, which is to be quote-unquote house, I believe the term is called house poor. But it's basically when the majority of your income goes towards paying off that mortgage or goes towards paying rent. So it's going towards that sort of thing in contrast to some of these other activities. And it's a bit of a catch-22 because your house is your biggest investment you're ever going to have. But at the same time, there's something to be said for a balanced lifestyle. So, anyways, so the fact that we've got increasing inventory and decreasing transactions is unsettling. So, and the alternative scenarios of that. Okay, so how you define the market if you have decreasing inventory and increasing transactions, that means that it's quote-unquote seller's market and you have a lot of buyers that are all trying to get in. And it's that whole concept of throw the sign in the front lawn, offer next day, and it's gone. Or offer that, or what have you. There's just this sense of churning. When you have an increase in transactions, or an increase in volume and a decrease in transactions, that means that the sign's going in the front lawn and it's sitting there and it's not moving. And you're waiting and you're competing for that buyer money. And then obviously if you increase or decrease proportionately, just means that's more or less stable and consistent in some capacity. These are some frightening numbers to look at. And the frustrating thing is, it's like we said, you can decrease the price proportionate to the decrease in affordability to more or less get your math accurate. Maybe you drop another, X percent to account for the increase in volume, but in the supply and demand side, I think the frustrating part is it's not for the lack of it's not because everybody's all of a sudden magically poor. It's not like that. It's just things were doing this, and it's exactly why I started this whole thing in terms of things were doing this, people are squirreling money away. But the problem is that you have to, your time hourly is not doing what somebody's house is doing just for the sake that they bought a house or they bought stock or what have you. So it's this, more or less, it's becoming the gap between the haves and the have-nots, actually. But it's Crazy is what it is that way. So, and the year in total, again, it's not for the sake that there's some drastic change that's happening. I mean, the market's still increasing in pricing, and I think the prediction is that we'll see some amount of leveling off, because we had nearly 20% decrease in number of units sold. What is that? Over the last year. Yeah. About 17% decrease. It's like I said, all of this is indicating it's slow down. I don't want to call it a correction, because there doesn't, unless the Fed drastically increases interest rates, which just deters everybody from trying to put their money into real estate. I think I've said it before, it's getting more to the point of, like, if you want to buy real estate, the goal is to just buy a place at this point where you know you can get out of, because you bought it for a reasonable price and you didn't get something crazy. Probably the new car comparison is accurate. So looking at a home that's been around for a while, not new construction, because you're not paying the new car price tag for the new construction, and then you move in and instantly it decreases in value because all of a sudden it's yours and not new. It's like when you look in the Carfax history for a car and you see how many owners it's had. Do you want the one fresh off the lot, or do you want the one that's been owned by 5 different people? Typically the value is in the one that's been owned by 5 different people. Supply doesn't hit north of 6 months until we get to north of 7 million, which is slower than last year. So in order to surpass that 6 month of inventory, you had to go all the way up to north of 10 in comparison to the year before. Oddly enough, though, in the last couple of years, it's been better for the higher price points. 2017 looked like the inventory sat a little longer. That 15 and over price point, though, is really, really slowing everything down. The other thing that I was looking at is that I think is always important to pay attention to, whether you're a buyer or a seller, is the gap between list price and purchase price. It just tells you how close you are to the market. It also gives, I think there's always a lot of buyers that are afraid to pull the trigger. They're afraid to make an offer until it's in that sweet spot, whatever they think it is. And then it's just a matter of, that's where it's priced at, but I want a discount. So they're in my zone of what I can afford, but then I want to walk away feeling good about my purchase. So for 2017, gap was less than 5%. So 5% off list price, pretty reasonable. It's a difference of, well, here it was a difference of less than 100 grand. 2018, though, just about 3%. So we got even tighter in 2018. But then you get to 2019, and now we're looking at 10% deduction. So that's, again, another good indicator for it's what I think is happening is it's just creating an overall picture. So for instance, we've got the increasing inventory, decreasing transactions, and the gap between list price and purchase price has increased to 10%. So that means if for whatever reason you're going in to list your house and you want to sell, know that there's a good chance that if a buyer knows their data, they may come in and say, you're listed for 2, I'm going to offer you 1.8, and I'm going to hold my ground. I'll offer you 1.75, but like realistically, I know I'm only going to go up to 1.8. That's more or less kind of what this is about. So again, it's just another indicator that there are more sellers and fewer buyers, and it's a supply and demand issue, and it gets reflected in the overall purchase price. Notice of defaults. We've got 143 total currently. It's down by almost 90% from 2010 when it was at 1137. And not surprising. I think most homes have a significant amount of equity in them by now. Unless, it was the few people who held onto their house post or through the recession, so it would have to be somebody bought in 07, held on to it, had interest-only loans, didn't pay it off, and are now sitting at that point, or refied and pulled more money out at some point or another. But most people ought to have at least a decent amount of equity in their home by now. So yeah, it's slowing down in general. So it doesn't mean that it's, like I said, it doesn't mean that it's over, because there's no reason for us to be jumping off a cliff. There's no lending restrictions are still there. They're still tight. So it is what it is that way. And people do have cash. People are in good financial health overall. It's just a matter of what they're choosing to do with their money and where it gets spent. But I think the interesting thing, that there's a data source for it, and this isn't one that comes up typically, is the savings. I do know that there's always some article or something that comes out that says that if the average American is not prepared for a $400 misstep, I think it is. I think it's just $400. So like if you own your home and your water heater blows and you have to replace that, most homeowners aren't prepared for that. So that's the frightening part. But the good example of desperate times calls for desperate measures here. And trying to find that market growth. I mean, that's the tough part, is that it's just not there anymore. So like, to anybody who's seen the show Flip or Flop, and they have like their outtake portion that they've been doing recently, they'll stop and say like, look, we, as a flipper, you want to be doing this in an increasing market, because you go in and you buy and you get all done at one point. But by the time that your house is all done, the market's gone up. So maybe those few hiccups that you had in the extra, 10% or something or other that you had to spend to get the house done and ready because you had unforeseen costs that popped up, all of a sudden are more or less taken care of, or covered in some capacity because the market's gone up. But we're not seeing that. So it'll be interesting to see how that looks moving forward. Again, it's not to say that it's done. And again, when I talk to investors, my comment's always, at this point in time, you're not going to see the appreciation. The best thing you can do is target cash flow. Because without the appreciation, if you're not generating that cash flow off your property, you just park your money somewhere. And you have to hope that someday that it appreciates enough such that if and or when you do choose to sell it down the road someday, that the cost of selling the property does not eat into the overall profitability or take away from your bottom line. But the thing that told me that there isn't a whole heck of a lot of room for growth and kind of trying to figure out what's going on I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and they had an article today that said Apple's answer to slower iPhone sales is getting customers to trade it in. So one of the top companies in all of the US has just more or less taken what they can. And they're not gaining any more market share. And I think real estate's kind of the same way. Real estate doesn't function exactly like that because it's not like there's this significant competitor. Everybody's got to figure out where to live. But the fact that it's that upward momentum. So somebody like a flip or flop couple, they're probably going to slow down. I know developers who are just kind of cool in their jets and hanging tight, not doing a whole heck of a lot because their margins have gone too slim. And it's made it such that there really isn't room for growth and the profitability has disappeared. And I think this article on Apple is a good reflection of that in terms of they can't seem to find new buyers for new Apple products, but they have all this inventory of new phones that they need to push out on either their existing customers or new ones. And the way that they can do it is the trade-in. I think when Steve Jobs was around, the drastic changes from model to model were very significant, such that you had that desire, you had that need to get in and go get the new phone. And I think nowadays, the drastic differences between models are clearly not significant enough for people to want to go in and turn it in on their own. You know, if Apple is having to artificially tell you that they want your phone back rather than be able to sell you the new shiny, then it's just a good indicator that it's slowing down. I mean, I'm the same way. Like, I don't care about having the latest and greatest. I don't care about the face recognition or the fact that the camera's turned the other. I don't care. Or that the button's missing so the screen. I don't care. Just need it to work. I need it to work. I need to call. I need to text. I need to email. I need internet, need all this stuff, my apps, but all this extra stuff is not creating significant more value to me in my life, such that I've got to have that one. So I think I'm currently on the 7. I don't see a need. Other than, I think you can call it social currency, but I don't really care. But it'll be interesting because I think that this is pretty universal in terms of, I think people have savings and they're trying to figure out what to do with it all. And it's not enough to go buy mounds of income property. It's not enough. I mean, they can buy some stocks and see what happens there, but it's been a little volatile between government shutdowns, trade, tariffs, and some of this other stuff. So the Trump bump is now, whether you want to call it a slump or just leveling off or just not producing what it maybe is. I don't want to say it's supposed to do, but growing like it was. It's challenging. But the other article that I wanted to reference here is part of more or less the end of this is, should high schools be required to teach financial literacy? It's true. They don't teach you anything. And they're saying that, we're in $13 trillion in debt. I don't know if that's the exact number. And yeah, I mean, even I remember being like a little kid thinking like, where's all your money go? Like, you don't know when you're in high school or what have you. You don't think about rent, the car payment, food, insurance. I don't know. If you're here, it's your workout classes and going to the blow dry bar. But it all just, it disappears. It does. It all kind of does this all the time, which is why that $400 like shocker life event is unmanageable for a lot of people. I looked at an application today from a woman who was getting separated. Poor lady, looking to rent a studio, and stuff is just not adding up for us. Yeah, it's brutal. But yeah, I mean, I think it's important for everybody to know, because it's, like I said, I mean, we're more or less capitalists and people just don't know. And it's a complete failure, I think, within the system. But at the same time, I think it's hard to fully grasp kind of how challenging some of this can be when you're in high school or whatever age you are, because you just don't have a full scope of how things can work that way. And it's hard. And, you know, unless it's of interest to you or what have you, you don't make it a priority. It doesn't come up. Don't make an effort to learn it. So you have to have friends or just be inundated with it in some capacity. But it's that's why I want to do this and hopefully help other people and get a better understanding of what does and doesn't work. And just be smart. I mean, it breaks my heart to look at an application from a woman who's being separated, who is looking to rent a studio, and I can't qualify her for the apartment. I mean, it's just, nobody should have to go through that. I mean, why? It's just, that kind of stuff just absolutely breaks my heart. But this is the best thing I can do for everybody, I think, and to share it. Because I would love nothing more than for every person to be able to qualify for every apartment. Whether it's the keeping up with the Joneses of like, oh, I want a cool new car, or it's, I want a nicer house, or I want a new couch, I wanted something. Or whether it's you gotta do something because you've had some life change, then, you know, it's important to know these things. And it just breaks my heart that people don't know about it and don't emphasize the point to learn it. So overall, things seem to be doing well, but there just isn't there isn't a lot of room for growth. So again, like I said, if you're a seller, be aware of that. Be aware of the fact there's a 10% gap between list price and purchase price. Be aware of the fact that inventory is increasing by 25%. Transactions have decreased by over 30%. And buyers, be aware of that. So even if you do think that you're at the top, this is the time to go in and be aggressive. Go in lowball if you can. And by lowball, I mean, if that gap is the 10%, maybe go after it closer to 15 to 20. See what happens. All you can do is ask. And sometimes it doesn't always work, and you have to come back and resubmit, but won't know until you try. But yeah, I know people are a little scared, a little nervous, and I think if anything, it's closer to, it's not a recession, it's not a crisis, but we're going to have some affordability concerns, for sure. That's going to cause the market to soften, but there's no reason for it to, quote unquote, take a turn, but soften and more or less try to figure out a move like what Apple's doing. But you're probably going to eliminate a lot of developers, maybe flippers is a better way to put it. There's still land, there's still stuff to develop, but the margin for growth, so the people who are in it for making money and profiting that way, that just aren't facilitating the transaction like myself, those people are gonna have to take a step back because they're not gonna see it, and maybe that'll have some positive impact for the market, because I think this morning we said that 10% of the sales for 2018 were spec builders. So if we can decrease the inventory by 10% by getting rid of spec builders, maybe that does something and stabilizes kind of where we are and allows the Fed to increase interest rates and not just kind of deaden the whole market. But without volume of transactions, it slows down. Deters a lot of people. But at the same time, if you're a buyer, jump in. Time to jump in, be aggressive. Because this might be the spot where you can be aggressive and capitalize on the interest rates now before the Fed goes up anymore. So you're kind of at that sweet spot where maybe you can catch the seller off guard because they're seeing this market change, but they haven't fully absorbed it. Maybe they're at the point where they're chasing the market down. You can still trap the combo of low ball, somebody who just needs to get out, and take advantage of the current interest rates. But yeah, the affordability portion, that part, that's, I think, the part that's really going to slow a lot of people down. But it doesn't mean that it's dead. Doesn't mean that's over. Doesn't mean that anything's really all that wrong. It's just the business. People are just deciding that it's not the right spot for them. So 2019 should be an interesting year, given the fact new year, new me, new market. So 2019 should be interesting that way. It's going to be a lot of floundering. I think it'll be interesting to see what happens out of the residential income. Wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing a lot of transactions there in contrast, because I think a lot of times investors choose to I think a lot of smart investors, when the market gets quote-unquote squirrely and doesn't seem to have a clear trajectory, I think a lot of investors can go in and take advantage of that time. So you see a lot of properties being listed in that space, and oftentimes that's because they have to do a 1031. So you list your property, sell it, and then 1031 and transition into something else. And the reason to do so when there's a slight hiccup is your biggest and most frustrating cost typically is your property taxes, because those aren't going to change and they're only going to go up by an average of 2% year over year. So if an investor can control their costs by purchasing at a lower rate and starting off at a better rate with your property taxes, those typically do better. So I do expect to see a good amount of transactions and a good amount of activity there. And people still have discretionary funds. People are still going on vacation. Somewhere. It's been driving me nuts. It's not like the last couple of years, but there's still people going on vacation. But yeah, it's it'll be interesting. I know my neighborhood, there's a lot listed, a lot more than there's been in the past. So keep an eye out, be aware, be smart, and be aggressive, and be ahead of the curve. Happy New Year. And again, going to work to say that, I feel like I say this every time. Going to work to be a little more consistent here. Hopefully that goes in with New Year, New Me. Next week, not sure what I'll cover. Maybe post-government shutdown stuff. Maybe it'll be an issue of supply and demand, given today's conversation. Maybe that would make the most sense here. Happy New Year. Hope everybody's off to a great start, and looking forward to planning their spring break, I guess. Bye. Thanks for watching. See you next time.